What is up, guys? It is time for an MLB Deeper Dive for the main slate today. We've already gotten some early slate content out there for you guys, and now we will go even further. 8 games more to come yet today. We'll talk through it all, but I am Chris Spags, joined by just one man today. The top DFS player in the world has opted not to be here, so instead we have Max Smitrotskiy. How are you doing, Max?
I have pretty big shoes to fill, I feel like, Spags. I don't know, man. I think we can manage it, though.
I think we're going to survive. And honestly, if you guys have watched some of the content this week that I've talked about, hopefully successfully to you guys, talking you out of some Padres exposure. That was not the case today, but the last few days, you can credit this guy, Max, here, who's a very sharp player, who just looks at all the angles out there, no pun intended, the launch angles in particular. I added to my sheet entirely because of your credibility, Max. I don't know if I've ever given you personally the shout out, but I legit put in data to my sheet just because of what you talk about. So that's the level of expertise you've inflicted upon me.
Listen, StatCast has been such a godsend for baseball. I mean, I can't wait till we get this type of data on other sports, because that will be the angle to get in on.
Yep, definitely a lot here that's going to be pertinent to the slate that we'll talk about as we go. And of course, the player projection is going to be an important part of what you do, as well as the ownership projections, which are in fact free for the main slate today at Awesemo.com. So make sure to go take a look at those. Actually, I'll drop a link in the chat too, in case anybody is on YouTube. See, we got our guy who I always hate saying the name because he's actually like a very nice guy, but you want some of these nuts is not the most credibility inducing username. I'm not one to judge necessarily, but I would say though, I appreciate your support. You want some of these nuts, and the rest of you out there, whether you have a silly username or a regular one, we appreciate you guys for watching as well. So hit that like button. And also make sure to go check out our sponsor for the day, JockMKT, which if you haven't heard of them, they have turned fantasy sports to a stock exchange where you can forget it's waiting until the end of the game to make money. That's so passe. Go make money every inning of a game, every second of a game. Go do it at JockMKT, where you can buy and sell and shares players of real time. Buy and sell shares of players in real time. There we go. That's the way that's supposed to go. For real money with guaranteed payouts for all shares at the end of the night. With daily markets for the NBA, MLB, NHL, and PGA, you can make real money every hour, every minute, every second of any match or game. And you use the pregame IPO to pick up shares of your favorite players. And then from there, you just buy and sell guys throughout the course of the game based upon what you're seeing. So if you are an eye test person, JockMKT's the place for you. So download the app, get started, and also use our exclusive Awesemo promo code of Awesemo for a $50 bonus on your first deposit. That's it. Take advantage of it. That promo code is Awesemo for a $50 deposit match. Go play on JockMKT, JockMKT. You're searching them on the App Store or elsewhere today. But Max, I'll ask you the question here. We're going to go game by game to game today because we haven't talked about this slate yet on the site. But any overarching thoughts for you? It's actually a star-studded slate, but you made an observation before the show about Jacob deGrom that maybe that's a good way to lead off on what we're seeing for the slate overall.
Listen, Jacob deGrom is maybe the best pitcher ever per pitch right now. The guy's throwing like 80 pitches a game and still putting up 35 DK points every game. But it's a little bit scary coming off of that elbow scare, and the Mets just never make the right decision, man. Like, how many times have they screwed the DFS players saying there's no pitch count, and then they let the guy throw 60 pitches, then take him out of the game? So at 60% owned, I'm going to go under on deGrom just because we have other guys. We got Cole, we got Wheeler, we got Kershaw. There's other guys with 30-point upside, 40-point upside even. So I think it's a good slate to stay away from deGrom here a little bit.
So that's a hot take right here off the jump. But let's get into one game that includes our other ace pitcher on the slate, Gerrit Cole. But we'll start with the Yankees hitters going against Ross Stripling. 4.7 implied runs for the Yankees. Stripling on the slate projected to be unowned, which does make sense given the fact that he's no longer good, or I guess if he ever has been good, certainly has not shown it lately. 23.9% carried on the year, 4.4% on run rate given up. Also one of the highest barrel ball marks on the slate, an 11.4% rate, 17-degree launch angle. So asking guys to basically put it out of the park, or at least get some quality hits against him. And Stripling, Max, I'm going to assume you're on the same page as me here. Not a guy to play, though he does get a decent pitch count, just a dude who doesn't get great results. Yankees hitters, though, have to be appealing on the other side. A park that does play a little more for power, though not great weather at Toronto's adjusted park here in Buffalo, but 63-degree weather, 51% humidity, but still a short enough porch where it does feel like, Max, that Yankees can get this done against Stripling.
Yeah, and I mean, when the Yankees hit home runs, like their home run hitters, it just goes far. Like they're not hitting 350-foot home runs. So yeah, I mean, Stripling is actually the perfect matchup for them because he's a reverse splits guy, gives up more hard contact, more fly balls to righties, and a better WOBA. So the Yankees only have good right-handed power hitters. Gary Sanchez is finally living up to his name from the first season that he was starting. 463 x slugging, 91 EV, and a really nice launch angle of 20 degrees. Like that's kind of what you want in a hitter there. As a catcher option, I think he's one of the top options today. And just the whole stack interests me. DJ LeMahieu really needs to get his launch angle up. It's 4.5 degrees. That is why he's not hitting the way he was hitting last year. That's really the only difference. So yeah, I really like Stanton, Judge, Sanchez, and then you could fit some other guys in around them. I'm not too into DJ and Urshela just because of their launch angles. But if we see like Higashioka is projected to be in the starting lineup today, maybe he's playing instead of Sanchez. Maybe Sanchez will be the DH. I'm not sure. But Andor is actually hitting the ball in the air a little bit more. He's only 3.1K. I like that play. And Ruben Odor has a really nice 16-degree launch angle, kind of swings for the fences. So I think you can play him as well.
Yeah, I think your point about LeMahieu is the one that really jumped out to me here. 24% expected ownership for LeMahieu, which is really driving up the overall ownership on the stack, where people don't seem like they want to play for or pay for Stanton today. An 8% expected ownership mark for him. Urshela also 6% ownership mark for him. So there are ways to stack this team up where if you just knock out LeMahieu and go to the other bats who have more pop, that seems like a pretty viable approach. And LeMahieu certainly could be useful as well at a relatively cheap price tag, 4,200 on DK. Not a bad mark, but with a quarter of the field expected to be on him, and also comparably high ownership for Kyle Higashioka, over 20% for him. Definitely some ways here that Higashioka I feel a little better about relative to the ownership, given that he's 2,700. But some ways to stack up the Yankees and maybe not get, I guess, quite as much ownership as it may seem. And that's a question for you too, Max. I guess, is there anybody, you mentioned some of the guys here, but anybody you'd really prioritize at the lower owned bats? Because you do have Andujar, you do have Gardner, you do have, again, Stanton and Urshela. And I feel like the latter two, Stanton and Urshela, seem to be the under 10% guys that really have the most upside.
Yeah, it's Stanton for me, just because Stripling doesn't strike anybody out, and that's Stanton's biggest problem. When he hits the ball, he hits it very hard. He's got an exit velocity of 97.8, which is top 5 in the league, and 62.2% hard hits. His launch angle is 9.3, does hit too many ground balls. But when he doesn't need to have a launch angle to get it out of the park just because he hits the ball so hard. So he will get like a 14-degree, a 16-degree home run, especially with the fences the way they are in Buffalo. So I love Stanton here.
Also, you want some of these nuts in the chat asking for suggestions for new usernames. So if you guys are out there, we always appreciate the support of the community. So help out a fellow member of the Awesemo community. Apparently his last name is in fact related to D's. The nuts part, he says, a nickname. How about some of D's hugs? I feel like let's make it a little more inclusive for everybody would be the move. But drop your suggestions in chat if you have any. Max, I don't know if any occur for you for our good friend. You want some of these nuts.
I had a friend in high school that used to walk around the hallways during school and scream D's nuts. So it actually reminds me of him. Maybe this is the guy. If your name is Joey, shout it out.
I bet that guy's like a CEO somewhere now, and that's the way you remember him. Let's talk about Gerrit Cole on the other side. 37% carried on the year. Certainly part of the recent controversy with pitchers using sticky substances on balls that has perhaps recently claimed Tyler Glasnow, if you're to accept that one, which I am a little more team Glasnow on that one. Seems unfair to change these guys midstream, but Gerrit Cole still has gotten decent strikeout results, and that's going to happen when you have a 97.3 velocity fastball. Still has good stuff, Max, but it does seem like a spot for Cole that he's going to be less owned than DeGrom by a wide margin, and that's the main appeal here. He's going against a Toronto team that doesn't strike out a ton, just 22.3% clip on the year, but it is Gerrit Cole, and I think that he's one of those guys that I expect is going to adapt fairly well to just whatever is going to be the case of the downswing that's had from his spin rate being affected. But give me your thoughts on him on today's slate.
Yeah, I think guys that have a really good fastball are going to fare better than guys that rely on breaking balls for their strikeouts. He did have a little bit of a scary 8.5% swinging strike rate in his last start versus Minnesota since the sticky thing. Just to put that in perspective, that's only his second sub 10% swinging strike rate of the year. The other one came against Houston, and as we know, Houston just doesn't swing and miss against anybody. So yeah, that's a little bit scary, but he did have a 98.2 average velocity on his fastball, which was the highest of the year. Threw a bunch of pitches over 100 miles an hour. I'm not really worried. The matchup really kind of sucks against this Toronto team that's just really, really good. Cole is really, really good against right-handers, and Toronto just throws out a bunch of right-handed hitters that are awesome against him. So, like, other than like Rowdy Tellez from the left side, like, I'm not really afraid of anybody. Biggio was having a really down year, only 351x slugging, was hurt, just coming back from injury. So I think it's a safer matchup. than you would think for Cole versus this lineup with all these right-handed hitters. But I also think it's a lower upside matchup than some of the other guys we're going to talk about.
Yeah, I think I'm on the same page with you here. And Toronto as well, the hitters, I'm not going to be terribly interested in. I think if you get some of these guys as one-offs, I wouldn't be opposed. There is certainly the potential here to hit home runs against Gerrit Cole. But, I think the lefties, I would agree, have a little higher shot of that, though. Still, Cole does have a 41% K rate against lefties since 2019. So definitely giving up a lot more power, but still does have some upside. But Toronto's bats, I guess, any interest at all for you there, given the fact that they do look significantly under-owned according to the top stacks tool, but that's the highest priority to be a top stack, which is 4.3% chance of getting there.
Yeah, not a stack for me, but I just mentioned Rowdy Tellez, and he's 2.3K. The guy has had maybe the unluckiest year of anyone. His exit velocity is 92.7. His launch angle is 12.8 and 50% hard hits. His X-slugging is 467, but for some reason, his year-to-date stats are way, way worse than that. So I feel like he's going to pick it up at some point. He's a really good hitter. 2.3K, you can't really argue with that.
All right, let's get to the next game here. We got Baltimore getting 3.2 implied runs. And whether you're watching this live or after the fact, hit that like button if you can. We appreciate the support a bunch, especially on an MLB day where the NBA news really just being egotistical, taking over everything with every player getting ruled out. So help us out. Show a little love and hit that like button. And of course, subscribe to the channel. Check out all the content, including a lot of NBA content coming up on the show or coming up on the stream later today, and PGA as well. So stay tuned for all of that. Baltimore, 3.2 implied runs against Aaron Civale. And Civale just one of those guys that usually to me doesn't grade out as a guy I'm trying to play, though. The fact he's thrown 99 pitches per appearance is a pretty noteworthy mark so far this year. 7% barrel ball rate is going to be on the lower side. Launch angle also pretty low. And for the most part, these guys pitching to contact, keeping the ball down. And that's I think maybe makes them playable in some amount of lineups. The field's going to be there 5%. That feels like enough going against Baltimore. But Max, as a result here, like Civale, I think fine. If you land on him, he does get deep into games, but a 20% K rate, it's not going to win you a lot of fantasy points. And Baltimore striking out 25% against right-hand pitching on the year. Not a great mark, but one that should give him a little more upside. So don't mind Civale, but also don't see a lot of interest in the Baltimore bats.
Yeah, it's kind of like a stay away spot for me from both angles. And I just said the same exact thing about Civale that you did. And then he put up 11 strikeouts in 8 innings versus Seattle. And I'm like, oh, really? I mean, he still only had a 12% swinging strike rate. So just a bunch of called strikeouts. And I mean, Seattle is just full of young hitters that swing and miss. And kind of Baltimore is too, but he just had the same exact start and only had 4 strikeouts in 6 innings. So that's kind of what I expect from Civale. Definitely not a guy that's going to win you a GPP, especially at 8.9K. So yeah, kind of a stay away spot for me. Keegan Aiken is definitely not a good pitcher. His launch angle given up is really, really good for home runs at 18 degrees. Only 19% strikeouts, 40% hard hits. It's just a matter of not really Indians not really having any really good power hitters. But like guys like Harold Ramirez, I'm interested in a 2.9K, kind of like a speed power combo, hitting 4th, too cheap in the outfield spot. I wouldn't stack the Indians, but I think I'm interested in like a Harold Ramirez. I'm surprised Bobby Bradley's in this lineup, but I guess because he's a lefty. But I also love that type of hitter against a guy that doesn't strike anybody out. So yeah, for me, it's probably Ramirez, maybe Austin Hedges at 2.5K at catcher spot. Just has a ton of power, but swings and misses way too much versus guys that can strike him out.
It's worth pointing out Cleveland has a good amount of ownership going their way. Ahmed Rosario, Jose Ramirez, Harold Ramirez, all going to be over 11% owned. And Ramirez does have that. Harold Ramirez that has a cheap price tag. Jose Ramirez is being priced like
6K. Jesus.
Yeah, it's like he's Mike Trout. After a 0 day yesterday too against Matt Harvey, one of the not proudest showings for Jose Ramirez. But I'm with you. I could take some stabs at Cleveland. Aiken to me not an impressive pitcher at all. Aiken also a guy that I do sometimes talk about being willing to take stabs on these 4K to 6K guys who are just going to open up a different construction. 4K to 6.5K, let's say. And Aiken is a guy who's pitching about 65 pitches per appearance so far this year, but closer to an opener than a fully fleshed out arm here. So not a guy to take stabs at, and he's going to have 2% ownership. So get a little bit of Cleveland if you want, but not the most appealing stack. And bottom of the order here, I'm not seeing Bobby Bradley in the projected lineup that I pulled, but Ben Chang, Josh Naylor, Austin Hedges, Zimmer, these guys are all awful against lefties in a way that is really special.
Yeah. Austin Hedges, like, that's the only guy I can even think of playing. Like, I don't know why Yu Chang is in the league. He's not a very good hitter. And Josh Naylor and Bradley Zimmer are just on the opposite side of the platoon. And I would rather Bobby Bradley be in the lineup, unless he can hit a home run. Like Naylor and Zimmer can't. So I'm not sure what this projected lineup is, but we'll see what it comes out, what it really is going to be.
You definitely want to watch closely here because the only good pitcher or only good hitter in the lineup right now, other than some of the cheap guys that we talked about, you could play for DFS, but Jose Ramirez is the only guy over a 180 ISO. So keep it in mind here for the Cleveland Indians lineup. Let's get to the next game. We got Chicago, the Cubs getting 2.4 implied runs against Jacob deGrom. Jacob deGrom, the pitch count's going to be the big question here. The numbers that I think Max talked about earlier in the show going to be really unquestionable. A 0.53 whip on the year, 46.2% K rate, 1.3% on run rate. We are talking really numbers that you don't see very often. 21.2% swing strike rate, which is higher than anybody else I think we've talked about on a slate by a pretty good margin. 44% chase rate. Honestly, I can just read all the numbers here because they are all like dark green on my sheet, meaning that he is the best pitcher in all these categories. But this spot, Max, it is a lot of ownership going his way, and he's going to have to work efficiently because if he doesn't get that pitch count much above, let's say 75, it's going to be tough to pay off an 11K price tag. So how are you handling him with 62% of the ownership expected on him on DraftKings?
Yeah, it's tough. But I mean, like, these are video game numbers that you just mentioned. His X slugging is 232 and his 46% strikeout rate and only 6% barrels given up. I mean, he's not going to give anything up. But if he goes 5 innings, he better strike out 10 guys because he's not going to give you that score at 11K that you need to pay off that salary. So I don't know. I'm torn on deGrom. I don't trust the Mets at all. I don't even trust the Mets to really give him a win against Robert Stock here, even though the guy is pretty bad. Yeah, I don't know. I think like my favorite pitchers are actually in that LA game that we're going to talk about later on. I think they're both underpriced for the spot, and I think they're both going to vie with deGrom for the best pitcher of the night. Gerrit Cole is going to be up there, but I question his upside with that swinging strike rate going down and the Blue Jays lineup. So, yeah, I mean, sure, deGrom is going to be a guy I use. I'm just going to use him with stacks that are going to be way, way under-owned, I think.
Yeah, I think that's a good way to look at it. And certainly to me, I could see the reason to get there. But if you were to cut deGrom to 33% ownership, I think you're taking on more than enough of them. You get some different looks for your lineups. And I like deGrom. I think it's hard to argue, even if he is going to pitch 5 innings, that he can still get the results that you want to see, especially against a Cubs team that's striking out at a 25.5% clip against, you'd assume are much worse pitchers. But definitely you are taking a lot of risk. And on FanDuel as well, he's going to be over 40% owned. So definitely keep that in mind no matter what site you're playing on today. Cubs bats, I'm going to assume here, Max, you don't have a ton of interest that way, even though if we do see less deGrom than usual, still a good bullpen behind him.
Yeah, I just don't think you need to go there. Yeah, I'm not really interested in the Cubs bats or really Mets bats. I've been down on Mets bats all year. I mean, other than Alonso, all these hitters aren't very good. Lindor's having a down year. Again, he's got some launch angle issues. Yeah, I mean, Billy McKinney maybe. Like he has a 17-degree launching on X slugging of 459, and he's always underpriced. So maybe that's a guy I would go towards. I'm not sure how deep Stock is going to pitch. I know that they're recalling him from the minors. I don't see anything about his pitch count. Do you, Spags?
No, I mean, I have to assume it's not that deep, given that he was never going that deep anyway, historically. Yeah, a 4K price tag. He actually has a decent projection on him from Awesemo today, which surprises me. He's got a 13 fantasy point projection for the 4K price tag, which I guess means that maybe Awesemo thinks he's going a little deeper.
He has a 33% strikeout rate in AAA this year, and only 5% walk rate. But I'm not sure if he's a starter or a reliever. 9 games for AAA Iowa. Yeah, I think he's only going to go a couple innings from what I'm seeing on DK here. So yeah, I don't think we can play him even at the 4K price tag. And then it's just going to be a bullpen game for the Cubbies. Yeah, other than like Billy McKinney at 3.2K, I'm just not seeing much from the Mets here.
Apparently Cubs fans very excited for Robert Stock. I guess he's been throwing 100 miles per hour in the minors for whatever appearances he's had there.
Okay. That's good.
At 4K, I could take the stab given the fact that he's going to be 2K less than Jose Ramirez. I think that's an option that I wouldn't mind, but I agree the pitch count does seem pretty dicey. And historically, he's only faced 118 batters since 2019, but it does give a 303 batting average. 24.6% K rate would be above league average still, but I think you might get some strikeouts here, but if you're getting 3.5 innings, it's a pretty narrow margin. So he's going to be 1% projected owned. If you get 5%, even 10%, I feel like I wouldn't be the mad ecstatic. It's going to open up whatever bats you want, but certainly a lot of risk to take on there. I would agree.
Yeah. I mean, looking at, he pitched last year out of the bullpen and he averaged 96 miles an hour. on his fastball. So yeah, he does throw hard. But the most he pitched last year was 2 innings. That's the most he went. So I'm assuming it's the same thing that he was doing this year in AAA, and that's why he has these elevated strikeout numbers. Yeah, I mean, it's not the end of the world if he gives you 10 points at 4K, right?
Yeah, that's the way that I would view it, where, it's really about not so much about the price tag, being something that you're going to get a 30 fantasy point ceiling out of, but there's some slates where that 4K guy can give you the bats and the stud pitcher next to him, whether that be DeGrom, whether that be Cole, whoever that may be, just a different construction to get to. Mets bats too, worth pointing out here. The top stacks tool has them a little bit under-owned, so if you are playing some stock, I think it wouldn't be the worst thing to take some Mets bats coming back and try to capture that mutual volatility the situation should have. Next game up, we got Boston getting 4.2 implied runs going against Ian Anderson. Ian Anderson's been really solid on the year. Sometimes a guy who can win you a slate depending upon the other pitching that's going to be available. Probably not the case today, I would think, overall, relative to having that upside. But in terms of value, $7,500 price tag on DK does look pretty good for a guy who's throwing about 94.2 pitches per appearance on the year. Not finishing batters off as fast as you'd like to see, 4.1 pitches per plate appearance, but still 25% K rate, low launch angle too. So you're not taking on a ton of risk here going against Boston. I feel like if you're going to play Ian Anderson, it's not the worst move. And I think people will certainly be afraid because of the Boston bats, Max, but I just don't mind Anderson. The 15% ownership too tag, I feel like that's perfectly reasonable number to get as well.
I really like Anderson today, actually. Boston is striking out more than they usually are. And that's because they have Bobby Dalbec and Renfroe in the lineup, and those guys can like a 30% rate. Plus they get to field a pitcher today. So I like the spot for Anderson. I think he's underpriced. I think he's about 1K too cheap for who he is. And you're right, he just doesn't give up much. His barrel percentage is only 9.5, 3.3 degree launch angle, 87.1 exit velocity. The walk rate is a little bit elevated at 9%. And these guys do walk a lot at the top of the Red Sox lineup. So he can get a little bit into trouble with the pitch count, I think. But at 7.5K, I think that's built in to the risk. And I think 15% maybe is even too high that we're projecting him for. I think people just don't play pitchers against the Red Sox. So if he comes in at like 10%, I think he's a great deal.
It's not bad humidity either in Atlanta today, a 40% humidity, actually a little bit under 80 degree weather. So conditions are going to be favorable more to Ian Anderson than they might be normally in this spot. So I don't hate it. The Boston bats, though, does seem like they are also under owned according to the top stack. So 8.6% chance of being a top stack in this situation with the only 4.2 implied runs, so not the best total. And I think for me, like, I never mind taking both sides of the equation for MLB because that is the way I think you just have to approach it overall, accounting for the fact that, the best hitters are going to fail 70% of the time and all that. But Boston hitters, I feel like you could play some of them, but I'm not dying to get there because of Anderson. So to me, I have no opposition to it. I get based on the top stack tool, people might want to go there, but how are you feeling about Boston? I assume you're going to be with me here where you just like the Ian Anderson side a little bit more.
Yeah, for sure. I don't mind some one-offs, but I don't think I'm going to get to stack Boston today.
Yeah, same page. So that's something to keep in mind there. Garrett Richards going to be on the other side. And also worth pointing out, Garrett Richards being in the lineup probably should be a helpful part to the strikeouts here for Ian Anderson too. But Richards on his side here, not a guy getting strikeouts on the year, 19.7% K rate. The 11% walk rate too is also really dangerous going against Atlanta, who certainly has a lot of power going their way. Richards, though, doing a good job keeping the ball down for the most part, 9-degree launch angle, 8% barrel ball rate, and that's actually rounding up a little bit for him. So Richards, I think, is a pitcher that I wouldn't want to roster at all. So let's put that part out there, despite the cheap price tag. Atlanta bats, though, going to be really chalky going against the Max. So if you like any interest at all in Garrett Richards, feel free to throw that in. But talk to me about the Braves bats. If not, and I guess how are you willing to handle them, given that they're looking real chalky, but I think it's hard to argue it going against Garrett Richards.
Yeah, I really hate the leverage score. Like if they're going to come in as the top owned stack, I'm probably going to go under just because of the stats you mentioned, where he just doesn't give up much in the way of home runs. He's definitely not a good pitcher. 52% hard hits, X slugging of 457, but the 9-degree launch angle and the fact that they're going to be chalky, I think you can stay away from some parts of this lineup. And I think the ones I would stay away from are the left-handed hitters. 55% ground ball rate versus lefties and only 35% hard hits. Versus from the right side, he's giving up 32% fly balls, 41% ground balls, and 38% hard hits. So if I'm going to stack some of these guys, I think it's going to be like the Riley and Dansby Swanson here. Just because these guys are like kind of home run or strikeout type of guys. And those are the guys I like to roster versus the Garrett Richards types. Plus, I think they're going to come in a little bit under owned just because they're batting 5th and 6th and they're priced up a little bit. I think Acuna, Freeman, and Albies are the chalk here. So if you can avoid them, I think the Braves are totally fine.
So that's a question I would have for you here, because we do have ownership, and we'll do a little money time here in 5 minutes. So I'll flip the hat. We'll give you guys the top 5 owned plays on DraftKings and FanDuel for free. Most profitable time in DFS. That's what we call that. But we do have a lot of ownership going to Acuna, going to Freeman, going to Albies. And I like them as plays, but normally not trying to play guys over 25 to 30% for myself on a slate of this size. So I guess, is there an ownership cap number for you that you feel comfortable with? For me, it's normally around 15 when those guys get that highly up, but you can probably justify a little more given the matchup.
Yeah, it depends on how I'm playing these guys. If it's a one-off, I don't want anybody over like 12% owned, just because I don't want chalky one-offs when it comes to hitters. If I'm playing a stack, I'll play some chalk in the stack, but I'm going to make sure that my stack has some single-digit guys. So it's just a matter of balancing everything out. And as I mentioned before, if I'm going to be playing like a DeGrom, I'm not going to play a Brave stack with DeGrom, just because that's going to be so highly owned in GPPs. You're going to have to get really, really lucky to get that to the top of the lineup of the GPP page. So if I'm playing DeGrom, I'm playing a stack that's going to be basically unowned. And if I'm playing the Braves, I'm going to fade DeGrom and play them with like a single-digit owned pitcher.
Yep, I think it's a logical move here, and it's worth pointing out that one of the guys that Max mentioned, Austin Riley, going to be under 10% owned. You'll also see less ownership for Kevin Smith and Guillermo Heredia, though neither guy really going to set the world on fire. So if you're looking for a guy who's actually got some pop, Austin Riley does have a 4.7% on run rate since 2019 against right-hand pitching, and certainly been up and down throughout the years, but I think his numbers are starting to turn around a little bit over the last season plus. So I think there could be some cause for hope here, and for whatever reason, he's the one that people are leaving out. I guess that price tag being part of it. Actually, Almonte, 2,300 though, is also a really nice price tag. That I'm looking at that.
Yeah, X slugging of 387, 38% hard hits. I don't know why they want to bat him fourth. That just doesn't make any sense to me. But I guess they want to split up. But no, then they have 2 switch hitters after Freeman. I don't know. Their regular lineup is Acuna, Freeman, Albies, Riley, Swanson, 1 through 5. And that's just such a high upside stat that putting in Almonte in there just doesn't make any sense to me.
He's getting on base against righties, a 410 clip so far. So like it gets Gerrit
24% walk rate. I think that's what's elevating it. But he only has like 50 at bats this year.
I like that for Riley and Swanson though, because I think that gives them a good shot at getting one guy on.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, Riley's the play here, right? Like 481 X slugging, 28% strikeout rate, but Richards is striking out only 19% of guys and only 23% whiffs. So to me, like Riley's the play you want here in your stack, as well as Swanson. I would fade one of Freeman or Albies and just hope they hit a million ground balls.
Yeah, there's definitely some pathways here for Atlanta to work and get to a slightly less chalky construction, but be mindful of it here and follow the ownership. But again, right now, it looks like Freeman, Albies, and Acuna all over 25% expected ownership on DK. And let me just see that on FanDuel too. To be fair for the FanDuel people out there, to make sure those numbers are right. Yeah, on FanDuel, they're actually going to be some of the chalkiest plays in the slate here, also over 25% owned. So we'll talk more about that in a second. Actually, I guess let's do a little early money time. So if anybody is tuning in late just for money time, that's their fault for missing this one now. So Max has the hat handy as well. I'll flip mine. And we'll give you guys the top 5 owned plays for DraftKings and FanDuel. And it's funny that you have that hat there. Like, it's going to be forever a keepsake that your wife will find and be like, what is going on? Why do you have this?
Exactly. Yeah. I mean, I cannot wear it in public, and I just don't have the confidence. Maybe if I was a more confident guy, I would be able to wear it in public. But
yeah, there's gonna be one day where it all clicks for you, and you're like, finally, I can wear this gold pleather.
And when I'm like 70 years old, I'm gonna have like those pants sitting around my waistline and that hat. That's gonna be it.
All right, so let's do money time now. Top 5 owned plays on DraftKings and FanDuel. You can always get the ownership projections for yourself every single day. Today, though, they're all free, so feel free to play along with us, and I'll drop the link in chat one more time for you guys to check it out. But if you want to get the Awesemo Plus memberships and save 15% on your first week, make sure to go to awesemo.com/join. Use the promo code MLB Deeper Dive if you want to save that 15%. Again, it's 15% off your first week. We have the Awesemo Plus full packages for all the sports, and also ones just for baseball. So there's going to be something for you on there at awesemo.com/join. With the promo code MLB live before lock. Top 5 owned play. Is Tyler getting nude? What is going? Did he put on money shirt?
He's got money pants.
He's got money pants, and he put them on in front of us, but not fully. That was
that was a little strange, but it's Tyler. We'll give him a pass.
Boys being boys, just changing for each other on Zoom sessions. No big deal. Top 5 plays on DraftKings. According to our ownership projections at Awesemo.com, Jacob deGrom, number 1 owned expected play on DraftKings, 62% there. Ronald Acuna, number 2 at 31%. Number 3, Gerrit Cole, 30%. Number 4, Ozzie Albies, 28%. Number 5, a guy we haven't talked about yet, Yordan Alvarez is 27.4%. And Max, out of these 5-year deGrom, Acuna, Cole, Albies, and Yordan Alvarez, I think Albies is going to be the one that you would say maybe you're coming less on, but how are you feeling about that top 5? And I guess there's one guy jump out as being particularly overowned.
Yeah, it's Albies for me. That second base spot, he's going to be so much chalkier, like especially in the high dollar contests, because he's 4.3K at second base. So I think he's the guy to fade there for sure. I mean, we already talked about deGrom. Yordan Alvarez is a great hitter, but there's so many good hitters in this Houston lineup that I feel like if you make a stack without him, it's just as good of an expected value play as playing Yordan Alvarez.
Yeah, I think it's a decent way to look at it, and we'll talk more about them coming up in a little bit here. The FanDuel top 5, though, Jacob deGrom, number 1 at 41%. So I guess that's a question. Let's talk about that in a second here. But deGrom, number 1, 41%. Number 2, Ronald Acuna, 27%. Number 3, Ozzie Albies, 27%. Number 4, Mike Yastrzemski, 26%. And number 5, Yordan Alvarez, again at 25%. Max, any thoughts on deGrom on FanDuel, where I guess you have a slightly lower chance of getting a quality start bonus if somehow the pitch count gets weird with deGrom? Yeah. But and just any thoughts on how you'd handle him on FanDuel, where that price tag could be really egregious?
Yeah, I mean, I think Wheeler and Kershaw are so under-owned there, just because you get like 60% of ownership from Cole and deGrom. So Kershaw is the guy that's really interesting to me. Goes deeper into games this year. Really good strikeout rate. And yeah, that Philly lineup doesn't really scare me versus left-handed pitchers. So yeah, especially like Harper's not going to be in that lineup, I don't think, because he got hurt yesterday. So like it's really watered down. Like looking at this lineup, they got Lucas Williams, Brad Miller, and Torreyes in it right now. That's coupled with Odubel Herrera leading off. I think Kershaw is probably my GPP play on FanDuel.
All right, so we'll get to that game here at the end here, but definitely some ways to move around on FanDuel, I think, from deGrom with that much ownership and that price tag. But let's get to our 5th game on the slate. Texas getting 3.5 implied runs against Houston. And Zach Greinke, an 18% K rate on the year, a pitcher whose price tag has come down a lot. So he'll actually be played a good amount today on DraftKings. He'll be just shy of 25% expected ownership on DraftKings today, which makes him one of the most over-leveraged pitchers on the slate. And this is one I get the price tag falling. Greinke has historically been sometimes around a 9K to 10K guy. I mean, it's been over 10K for periods of his career, and that's something that's always been a little bit odd, but normally been consistent, Max. And this year, that's kind of gone away at 4.2 xFIP. He's pitching a little more contact. The home run rates come up enough to a 3.2% rate compared to 2.7% since 2019. And Greinke, I think, feel like just looks like a very average pitcher and a guy that I have no issue getting less than the field of today at 25% ownership. It's a good matchup against Texas, who are striking out at a 26% clip on the year against right-hand pitching, but Greinke's stuff being worse, and the swinging strike rate's down a lot, chase rate's flat, so that's a good thing for him. But I just don't think Greinke's stuff has been there, and if it ever has been, then are you willing to be here, I guess, with the field, given the price tag?
No, way under for me. These are the types of guys I always fade. Just looking at his StatCast numbers, way too many hard hits, way too many barrels given up. And it's not like Texas doesn't have a good power lineup. They do. They can get to pretty much anybody. They've gotten to Cole this year. They've gotten to way better pitchers than Greinke is. The roof was closed in Houston, so that's definitely good for Greinke, but they still got those Crawford boxes right there. And he's giving up way more power to righties this year that are aiming at those Crawford boxes. So you can get some cheap home runs here from Texas. I don't mind playing one-offs from this team. I think that's a good play against an over-owned Greinke. And at 7.4K, I think Anderson's just such a much better play at 7.5K here. Just better strikeout upside, just better overall upside. Greinke in his last, 8 starts has had a double-digit swinging strike rate twice. And it wasn't even against Texas. Last time he faced Texas, he had a 7.8% swinging strike rate. That's just not going to win you a GPP. People always flock to these safe pitchers in baseball, but that doesn't exist anymore. Like maybe 10 years ago when it was a bunt and stolen base league, that you could see that more of that happening. But everybody swings for the fences now. Everybody knows about launch angles. Everybody knows about these advanced stats. So you can't really get away with the stuff like with the Greinke type guy anymore and think that he's going to give you a GPP winning score. It just doesn't happen.
Yeah, I'm with you on it. I get the price tag. I think it's going to make a lot of lineups work, but and if you are playing Greinke too, just make sure your stacks are going to be a little bit different than the fields too, because that's going to be a big part of why Greinke's so owned, is that people probably don't love Greinke. They just see like, oh, he's not going to kill me. He needs this price tag like Max is talking about. And I think it's going to lead you to very similar constructions to a lot of people. And that's something you generally are going to want to avoid. Texas bats, though, given what we talked about with Greinke, I don't like Greinke, but I also don't really like the Texas bats. They are basically unknown, so you could make the case a little bit there. But Roof being closed, a bad team anyway, and the power really just kind of has to come from Adolis Garcia or Joey Gallo, and there's really not a lot else here. But are you feeling anything at all for Texas, given the fact they are a completely unknown stack against a pitcher that is going to be really chalky?
Yeah, I mean, I'd like Adolis. I always kind of like Nick Solak. I think he's a good second base pivot here. Not a lot of power, but really nice speed, steals some bases. So that's the type of guy I would play. I think Adolis makes for really, really good leverage in this spot. Yeah, maybe just those two guys for me, not really a stack I would go to.
Yeah, it's definitely a low implied total here, 3.5 implied runs, and that's why people are going to Greinke. He's got a high money line and a low implied total against him, but it doesn't mean you're going to get strikeouts. Jordan Lyles on the other side should also benefit from the roof being closed. And Jordan Lyles is a guy every single time that he is on a slate I want to pick on, but he somehow just keeps cobbling together passable days. And I don't get why, when you look at the numbers, a 9% barrel ball rate this year, 16-degree launch angle. He's given up 19% K rate, so under league average there, 290 batting average, 1.5 whip. He's just really bad across the board. So I would say, first of all, probably not a pitcher you want to get to, though is throwing 85 pitches per appearance for $5,400. So keep that in mind. But just a guy, Max, that I see no redeeming qualities to Jordan Lyles. I get why people would want to stack against him, though. It does look like it won't be full stacks going against him. A lot of mini stacking or one-offs with Yordan Alvarez and Michael Brantley in particular. But how are you feeling about the Astros here going against Lyles? And I guess if you have any interest for Lyles as well, feel free to rebut any points I made about him being terrible.
No, he's awful. I mean, you're right on there. But I mean, Houston is the stack to go to, right? Just because of their leverage score. They're only projected for 11% ownership and 12% of being a top stack, which you don't really see these types of teams being under-owned. I think it's because they're all expensive, which makes sense. And so you can't really get to the DeGroms and the Coles and still get a really good lineup around them. But I think you can get enough 2K bats where you can fit a DeGrom and a Cole with them, or just go down to one of the Wheelers or Kershaws that we're going to talk about. But I really like that stack. I think you also have to take into account the fact that the Rangers bullpen is pretty bad. So they're not going to put up anybody after Lyles that is going to scare you. So yeah, I think avoiding like an Alvarez in the stack makes a lot of sense. I love Kyle Tucker. I know he's like questionable here, but at 4.1K, the guy's, I think he has the highest barrel percentage on this team, or really close. 621 X slugging for Tucker, 49% hard hits, and an 18-degree launch angle. This is just ridiculous video game numbers. Also run really bad this year. I love Tucker. I love Yuli Gurriel. People never play him in the stack. I think he's always under-owned. Correa. I always fade Altuve, and then he hits like a 360-foot home run. So that's probably going to happen again today. But it's just not a type of guy I play anymore at 5.6K. But other than that, I think Bregman, Alvarez, Gurriel, Correa, Tucker make for a really nice stack.
Yeah, Brantley's got a very cheap price tag, and it wouldn't shock me if he's even higher owned than the 22% we have for him. So that's something to keep in mind for me too, where I do like the spot going against Lyles, and Brantley's certainly a better hitter against righties than he is against lefties, but his ownership is going to be right there with Yordan Alvarez. So to me, if you take one of those guys out, I think that's the move. And I'm with you, Kyle Tucker. I think he'll be decently owned, but not quite as much as these guys. And he does represent that value. So to me, if you were to go to from Brantley to Tucker as part of a 3-man or a 5-man stack, I think that's one way to get less ownership and probably get a very similar player at a similar price tag.
Yeah, Brantley, the only guy in this lineup with a launch angle that's not in double digits. Mm-hmm. So they obviously preach hitting the ball into the air and getting line drives and home runs, but that's just not who Michael Brantley is. He's always been a very level swing type hitter. So even though he has an X slugging of 544 and a really nice 45% hard hit rate, I don't mind fading him for one of the home run guys in Alvarez and Tucker.
Yep, I'm with you on that. So yeah, definitely a stack to watch here, and one that the ownership going to be mostly to Brantley, Alvarez, and Kyle Tucker. And you get guys that Max mentioned, Yuli Gurriel under 5%, Carlos Correa under 5%, Bregman a little bit above 5, Jose Altuve under 10. So some ways to get here and get this team without it being as chalky as it might be for normally a team who's also going to be number 1 on FanDuel too. And they are looking under-owned on both sites right now. Next game up, we got Arizona getting 3.4 implied runs against Anthony DeSclafani. And DeSclafani, strikeout rate down to 22.1% this year, though he has been better overall in terms of giving up less walks and hits, just a 1.02 whip compared to a 1.2 whip since 2019. DeSclafani, the price tag, he's a guy I feel like I would prefer to get to over Greinke relative to ownership, but still it's not a great matchup against Arizona. 24.3% K rate on the year against right-hand pitching. 135 ISO, so not a lot of danger coming back either, but it does seem like a spot max where I don't mind DeSclafani, I guess, relative to Greinke, but I'm just a guy who also doesn't have a ton of upside. And if you feel like he's not worth playing, I think I'm also completely okay with that.
No, I actually like him over Greinke. I think there's more upside here, and I think the lineup he's facing is worse. Gets to face a pitcher. I really don't mind DeSclafani here. I think I would probably play Ian Anderson over him just because of the upside and the ownership. But DeSclafani definitely makes sense here. He was like putting up 20%, 15% swinging strike rates, but in the last 3 games, it's all been single digits. But I am interested that he had a 94.8 average velocity on his fastball last start, which is his highest of the year. So that's interesting. That's good for strikeouts for sure. Also not a lot of hard hits. That's nice to see. Really nice xFIP, 307 last start, 328 versus the Cubbies. I think he's definitely good and a great pivot off of the guys we talked about. Also, Arizona lineup is just not good. They don't strike out much, but they also don't have a lot of power. So, I think I like DeSclafani as my second pivot off of a chalky Greinke today.
Yep. So same page for me there. And I would agree. I think your Ian Anderson point, like he's clearly I would say the higher priority pivot out of them. But DeSclafani, less ownership. So he's in the mix too. And again, just try to get these, for me, of like flattening these guys out where you get less Greinke, more DeSclafani, a little bit more Ian Anderson. Like that's a very viable approach today to get similar pitchers, similar price points. Arizona's hitters though, I guess, would you have any interest there? Because DeSclafani is certainly not great by any stretch. He has been good at run prevention. And it is a day in San Francisco where there will be more humidity, 60% humidity, but not enough here with a 68-degree day to really matter. So the hitters, you have a couple guys I feel like that are going to stand out a little with Eduardo Escobar, Christian Walker, over 200 ISOs, Ketel Marte not far behind, but any love for them at all? They look over-owned according to the top stacks tool too. So I don't see it with not a lot of ownership going to DeSclafani, so you're not getting leverage, and the Arizona hitters themselves, I feel like not standing out meaningfully enough for me.
I mean, you can really tell when you look at the StatCast numbers which teams are preaching launch angles and exit velocity versus teams that aren't. And Arizona is one of the teams that does not preach that. Ketel Marte, only 4.4 degree launch angle. How does he have a 481 slugging? Like, it doesn't make any sense to me. He hits the ball really hard at 50%. So that's the only reason I can see that. But they have one guy in the 5s of X slugging, and that's Carson Kelly. I think he had a really, really good start to the year, kind of cooled off since then. Only 38% hard hits. Yeah, just not a team I'm going to get to a ton. I like Pavin Smith if he's in the lineup. He's not in the, I don't see him in a projected lineup, but he has the only good StatCast numbers here. Other than that, like Christian Walker, you mentioned, X slugging of 354. Maybe he's still hurt, but this is not the guy that we're used to seeing from the years when he was hitting a ton of home runs. So, yeah, just not really interested in Arizona. I think that DeSclafani is a really good play when you look at the Arizona hitters. Not a lot of strikeouts here either, but just not a lot of hard contact or good launch angles.
Yeah, that is one of those things too with looking at, like, generally for baseball, I do like to look at the longer term sample size compared to the shorter term, but Walker really has fallen off a cliff where the last season and change he's been down to 161 ISO, 92 WRC plus. And he is one of those guys that I think it looks worse. I do like to believe in the power of positive regression for the most part, as well as just positivity in general. But I would say with Walker, it has been an appreciable fall. Like, he's under league average in terms of home run rate now, and that used to be all he had going for him.
Exactly. Yeah, he still has a good launch angle. So just not hitting the ball hard enough. He has a 37.9% hard hit rate and an 87.9 exit velocity, and that's just not going to do it. He needs to swing harder, and that's the only thing that I can think of is injuries, because he used to swing really, really hard.
Yeah, so maybe something to watch here over the course of time. And, as the parks do heat up across the country too, certainly something where that could possibly regress a little bit more. Merrill Kelly on the other side, another not good pitcher here in the price tag. We've talked about a lot on the show, but a guy that to me, I feel like honestly, he's the most Greinke-like pitcher in terms of not getting strikeouts and a little bit worse in terms of run prevention, but still a low barrel ball rate. I would still honestly take a little bit more of him over getting to Greinke, given the chalky nature that we're expecting to go Greinke's way. Merrill Kelly under 5% ownership. On all that said, I don't think Merrill Kelly is good. In fact, I don't think I've ever been like, play some Merrill Kelly, but I just feel like compared to Greinke, like he at least works efficiently, 3.6 pitches per batter faced, and that's a good mark. And he can sort of extend his pitch count enough as long as he doesn't get bombed. So Merrill Kelly, Max, not a guy that I'm advocating for fully, but if you get him, like I just wouldn't be like, I got to get rid of my lineups.
I don't hate him. I mean, looking at his advanced numbers, like the last 8 starts, only 1 start with an xFIP over 4. So he just doesn't give much up. Lots of ground balls, lots of weak contact. Doesn't really strike out too many guys, but also strikes out more guys than Greinke does. So that's what you're looking for really in your SP2 today. Definitely not a guy I would use as my SP1, but don't hate him as an SP2. The San Francisco lineup is a little bit watered down right now, with a couple guys injured. So they still have some really good hitters here. I mean, Posey, Crawford, Yastrzemski. These are the guys that you would be worried about. But other than that, not really anybody that scares you. Like Lamonte Wade is a strikeout at the top of his lineup. They're playing Wilmer Flores against everybody right now because of these injuries. Like Longoria was one of their best hitters overall, got injured. Dickerson was one of their best hitters, got injured. So this lineup is watered down for sure. I don't really see the 4.6 runs for San Francisco. I think you can bet that total to be under today. So that's a decent prop bet for you. I definitely don't hate Merrill Kelly.
Yeah, I think Merrill Kelly is mediocre enough to get through, hopefully, though. San Francisco really has been teeing off on the ball where this is a team where I think you're talking about Arizona, it's kind of the inverse here where all these guys are launch angle guys, Flores even, and Brandon Belt, who's been, I think, that for a while now, and Yastrzemski too, Wade. So I wouldn't mind taking a little bit of stabs here, especially if you end up playing more Merrill Kelly than the field, just to kind of hedge against the fact that you are playing Merrill Kelly. I think I'm with you conceptually, though. Like, it's not a great hitting condition situation for him either. So these guys are going to really have to work hard to drive the ball out.
Yeah, like this is exactly what you mentioned. Like if you're going to take a stab at a stack that's not projected highly, you want a stack with a really good launch angles. And they also all walk a lot. So it's like a money ball approach, right? Get on base and hit 3-run home runs, which is what you want in DFS. Like that works really well for us to win GPPs. So this is the type of stack I would take a shot on for sure. I love Brandon Crawford, what he's done this year. Totally changed his launch angle. Used to be like a ground ball guy. Now always hits the ball in the air. More strikeouts, but also more home runs.
And then we got our next game up. Philadelphia, 3.2 implied runs going against Clayton Kershaw. Worth pointing out that I will be in attendance at this game after a whole lot of fucking issues with SeatGeek today, where the guy sent the tickets and they were supposed to be together. And then on the ticket, it was like, one is row B and one is row N. And I was like, I got the tickets because my girlfriend's a Phillies fan and she just got a new job this week with Lululemon. So we're doing a little celebration for it. And I'm like, what better way to celebrate than being 10 rows, or not even 10, like 15 rows away from your significant other at a baseball game. But we figured it out. And I will be there watching Clayton Kershaw. And as a result, I guess probably expect him to get bombed out. But I do like the spot for him at 29% K rate. Philly's striking out at a 27% clip on the year against left-hand pitching. Certainly some guys who have power, but it's not a humid day here, or it's actually a little humid relative to LA standards, but still only 57% humidity, 75 degrees expected by first pitch. So I don't see them getting to Kershaw very much here. His numbers have taken a nice jump upwards, a 16.4% swing and strike rate this year compared to 13.7% historically. He's going to be 20% owned, Max, but low barrel ball rate, low launch angle, all the stuff that we've been preaching all show. He's got it all here against a weakened Phillies team. So I feel like it all does grade out really well for Clayton Kershaw.
Yeah, I love Kershaw on the spot, and this lineup really looks watered down when you look at the projected lineup here. Like the guys that we mentioned, Brad Miller, the lefty versus lefty, you don't want to see that. Lucas Williams, Ronald Torreyes, then you have the pitcher, obviously. Audubel Herrera leading off, lefty. So other than Real Muto and Hoskins, this lineup just doesn't scare you. Alec Baum still can't figure out his launch angle, hitting a ton of ground balls. So I love the spot for Kershaw. I mean, he's actually getting to like mid 90s and over 100 pitches in some spots too, so which you love to see. I think it's a great spot for Kershaw's leverage off of Cole and DeGrom.
Yeah, I would agree. I think if for any laps you're not getting to those guys, certainly not a bad SP1 to put in instead in the hopes of capturing some upside. Phillies bats, I would find it hard to go to here. I'm just not seeing anything with Kershaw that's leading me to think this is going to be the spot that he blows up. And I think, there are some guys here. Wouldn't shock me if he gives up like a one-off bomb to a guy like Hoskins or even McCutchen. But, and honestly, Luke Williams has been hitting the ball pretty well, though I think that's probably unsustainable. But Hoskins in particular, like the one thing he does well is hit lefties. So I think that's okay as a one-off here, his price tag. But besides that, though, the Philly stack, I think the only appealing thing they have going for him, Max, is the price tag. So are you willing to get there at all?
No, not for me. And especially the Dodgers have a really good bullpen as well. Yeah, I mean, the strikeouts rate are really high. Rates are really high for the Phillies here. Alec Baum at 27, Hoskins at 27. It doesn't look like Segura's in this lineup, and he really doesn't strike out at only 14%. But other than that, all these guys strike out a little bit. So yeah, not a stack I'm willing to go to. If I'm going to play a one-off, it's probably going to be like a Realmuto or a Hoskins, just because they're like Realmuto fits your catcher spot, only 4.5K, tons of power, and Hoskins at 4.4K just gives you some home run power, but not really interested in the stack here.
Yeah, Hoskins certainly under 3% ownership. That's really jumping out to me too. And he's at a 161 WRC plus over the last few years as well. So hitting against lefty is much better than league average. So that's one that intrigues me there at the price tag. And McCutchen too, honestly, 3,400. One-offs here I think are appealing here to save a little money and actually have a little bit of upside. Zach Wheeler on the other side though, he's been fantastic on the year as well. Going to be a little bit cheaper than Kershaw, and a pitcher who's been solid on the year. Actually a better strikeout rate than Kershaw, 32.4% K rate, swing strike rate not quite as impressive, but still the numbers have been there for him. Low barreled ball rate for him, 5.6% is going to be actually the lowest mark on the slate. Low launch angle too. And Wheeler, I think if anybody's going to be able to inhibit the Dodgers for the most part, they are hurt again with Cody Bellinger out back on the 10-day IL. But Wheeler in this spot, I feel like a perfectly fine pitcher. There's only so much ownership to go around, Max, but at 13%, I feel like Wheeler is actually a solid play, though strikeout upside going to definitely be in question here.
I mean, this is the spot for Wheeler, right? As a leverage play. In the projected Dodger lineup, like who scares you here? Max Muncy's in the projected lineup. Cody Bellinger is in the projected lineup. So it's Betts, Lux, Turner, Beatty, Taylor, Pollock, McKinstry, and Barnes. Like Will Smith isn't in the projected lineup. If this is the lineup that comes out for the Dodgers, I'm going to play a ton of Wheeler. His swinging strike rate in the last 5 starts, 18, 19, 16, 15, 16. That's awesome. That's like Cole and DeGrom like. And he's very, very good at limiting his pitch count, goes deep into games. Yeah, I don't see any spot here where I would avoid Wheeler. And 9.6K is a really good price tag facing the usually scary Dodger lineup.
Yeah, I agree. And the ownership being under 15% too definitely has some appeal. And I'm with all of that. And I agree too. The Dodger stack looks weaker than usual here. Like you go to the middle of the order guys and they're all perfectly fine hitters, but nobody really stands out meaningfully. And it's hard to see them getting, to me, great results against Wheeler. So I'll just throw it out there because they do only have 1% aggregate ownership expected. But any Dodgers bats for you, given the fact that Wheeler is, certainly a player who historically has given up some more hits. So this year, it's certainly a new man.
Yeah, no, just like way too low power given up, 5.6% barrels, X slugging of 317, 31% hard hits. And without Bellinger or Muncy, like Muncy's always my one-off from the Dodgers, just because he's the type of guy I love to roster. You can get him at second base sometimes. He used to be second base eligible. So if he's not in this projected lineup, I'm not playing any Dodgers.
And our third co-host for the day, you want some D, is saying Hoskins is 0 for 34 in his last at-bats, Max. So you have any rebuttal to that? I would just rebut and say
he's due.
That he's due.
Yeah, that's the only rebuttal you can think of there, right?
Law of averages. Honestly, though, the thing for him is that if he's going against righties, he actually is like a very pedestrian hitter against righties.
Yeah.
Against lefties, he's basically Nelson Cruz, and that's something to keep in mind.
Exactly. I mean, he's going to be a platoon guy eventually, I think. But, I mean, he was supposed to be a really high-touted prospect. Came out just on fire when he first came up. I'm sure A-Town is going to give us shit for talking down Hoskins, but he's just not as good a hitter as they expected him to be.
All right, the last game on the slate, we got Minnesota getting 4.4 implied runs against Justice Sheffield. Justice Sheffield, despite the one good game he's had recently, a 17% carry rate on the year, 1.6 whip, giving up a 9% walk rate, generally just kind of useless as a pitcher. They're going to be 1% owned, though, so if you want to go there, you certainly can, and nobody else will. That said, though, he does also keep the ball down pretty well, 9-degree launch angle, going against the Twins lineup that is really one of their weaker ones. If this is the projected lineup, is the case? Not a lot of guys who get great lift. Certainly guys who do put up hard contact, though, so maybe this is spot max for which you're a little more interested in the Twins, but they've disappointed me enough recently that I think Justice Sheffield is just not a guy who's going to give up massive production. So I don't want to be there a ton, but how are you feeling about the Twins? They are projected to have 10% aggregate ownership for the stack and 11% chance of being a top stack. So technically a little bit under owned.
Sheffield sucks, right? And this is the team that's used to destroy left-handed pitching. Like Nelson Cruz, Donaldson, Miguel Sano. Like these are the guys that used to hit home runs against lefties like every two at bats when they were 30% owned. And now like I'm getting them at single digits and they're not doing anything. Like I stacked the crap out of this team versus Marco Gonzalez, who I think is like the worst pitcher in the league. As far as launch angle, like all of us expected stats are just like laughable. And they did nothing. Made him look like Cy Young. I don't know, man. I think I'm going to trust this top stacks tool and actually play them again. I'm sure it's going to hurt me. I love Donaldson, Cruz, and Sano. So like that 3-man makes a lot of sense to me. And I think you can throw Kirilloff in there. He hits lefties pretty well. If Sheffield doesn't stay in there long enough, he's going to get the bullpen. Seattle bullpen's not good. So other than the park being bad here, I really don't see this being as a bad spot for the Twins. I like the Twins here.
Yeah, I think they're worth taking stabs on. It's worth pointing out Ryan Jeffers is very cheap and honestly doesn't look like a bad play, but he's 2,800, so he's going to get a lot of the optimizer plays for himself. So if you're getting him in a lineup, I would say probably should be in more of a full stack more than anything, and try to avoid him as a one-off. Bailey Ober's on the other side. He's been very mediocre on the year as well in terms of results, though the strikeout rate's actually been much higher than I realized. 26% K rate for him on the year. He's only faced 57 batters, but a 21-degree launch angle, 10% barrel ball rate. Those things do portend worse things to come. The question is whether they can come against Seattle in a park that is, as Max mentioned, going to inhibit production for the most part. So I don't see the 16% ownership for, actually, well, I guess $4,600 price tag. Yeah. All right. I get the 16% ownership for Ober. That said, it's a really risky spot, I would think, though Seattle does have a 26.2% K rate against right-hand pitching. So are you team Bailey Ober or team Seattle or team, I think where I would land is that you can play a little bit of both sides here and try to capture whatever happens in the situation.
Dude, Bailey Ober is in a great spot just because Seattle strikes out so much. And if Haniger is not in this lineup, it's just really, really weak. That said, if I'm playing a ton of Bailey Ober, which I will be because I've already decided at 4.6K, that's the guy I'm going to go to. I'm also going to have a lot of Kyle Seager and Jake Fraley one-offs because those are the guys that are going to hit home runs in the spot, maybe even a little bit of Jake Bowers. But I just think it's such a good strikeout matchup. And that strikeout rate is pretty good. His xFIP looks decent. The last two starts, 3.4 and then 2.47. And that's against Houston and Kansas City. Those are really good offenses. Like he got 7 strikeouts against Houston. I don't know many pitchers that at the top tier that have gotten 7 strikeouts versus Houston this year. So, I mean, maybe they had the garbage cans put away that game. I'm not sure what happened, but Bailey Ober definitely has shown enough for me at 4.6K to just play a bunch of him. And yeah, I just don't think too many these guys are ever chalky at 4.6K. So I think I can get a decent amount of him where I can go over the field. And I think he's in a really good projection type spot.
Yeah, I would agree. And I think too, hedging a little bit with the Mariners bats like you're talking about seems like a logical move for me. And you have enough guys here who have at least some pop on paper that you can get results. But I agree, taking a stab at Over at that price tag. He looks like a little bit of a better play than Stock. The projections are pretty close from Awesemo, but I think you're forgetting, 20% of both those guys combined. That doesn't seem like a bad approach to me and one that the field probably won't be too heavy on.
Yeah, no, I love that. Especially playing them in order to get a high upside stack with one of the expensive pitchers makes sense to me. Especially one of these stacks that look to be under owned just because they're expensive, like a Houston or what was the other one that we mentioned? I guess the Yankees are a little bit under owned. They're really close to their projected ownerships. Like one of those two stacks, playing them with an Ober, I think makes a lot of sense.
All right, now let's close it out here. Obviously, we've covered all the teams, and you guys can make sure to check out the ownership projections right up to lock. Those are free today, so you can refresh them and see everything throughout the course of the day. But let's do a home run pick. And I don't know if there are any props you want to hit on, but we did talk about some of the home run props on the earlier show. And there were a lot of good ones for the Coors game. I'm actually just double checking to see what looks good. Stanton plus 260, still not the top odds getter for a home run, which kind of surprised me given what we talked about, the matchup with Stripling and all of that. So Stanton to me jumps out as having a good home run prop, and I'm comfortable taking him as my home run pick overall. But plus 260, I feel like the odds are just too generous there. But Max, do you have one that comes to mind, whether it be an actual bet or just a pick of a player on the slate?
Yeah, I bet Acuna just because I'm not going to have him in DFS today. And he's in a really good spot against Garrett Richards. I just don't want to pay that 30% ownership that you're going to end up on Acuna. But he was plus 260 as well. So I just took that. And if he hits a home run, I'll make a little bit of money, even though I won't have I'll be under on him in DFS.
Yeah, and I think it looks like our boy You Want Some of D's deciding between You Want Some of D's stacks or D's dongs. I feel like D's dongs at least is more relevant to sport.
Alliteration, right?
Yeah, and it still also is phallic and genital related like this current name. So I would say dongs, and Max, he did say that we are his top two favorites. So I feel like now we both have to support him no matter what he does.
I mean, D's dongs is my favorite guy right now just because he gave us a shout out. So keep watching and hopefully he will bet one of these guys that we talked about today and get a home run.
Yeah, hopefully this all works out for you guys today. And make sure to go follow DFS Max to see all the stuff that Max is doing on our shows here and elsewhere. Make sure to follow me at Chris Spags as well and follow at Awesemo_com. And stay tuned on the channel. In half an hour, I'll be back here once again to do the final tip-off show for now here. Well, that goes on hiatus with the basketball season getting close to wrapping up. We'll have a lot to talk about with the NBA being an absolute disaster of injuries and all that coming up. So stay tuned there. And of course, watch everything on the channel. Hit the like button and subscribe. We'll see you guys again very soon. Enjoy your days. Good luck.
Later.
What?